and welcome to Zombie Kitty podcast. Now you might be, if you follow me on Twitter, you might have noticed that I've recently been putting up pictures from a little app called Pokemon Go. Does anyone know what this is? Okay, yeah, I'm just messing with you. Everyone knows what this is. My whole town is playing this app, and yeah, I'm also obsessed with it. I suppose it's sort of brought in billions for Nintendo. It's broken their own stock record, and it's been a lot of help, and it's helped people really. So, which is probably something you wouldn't expect with a mobile app. I think it's good what good the apps actually brought in. However, this is a film podcast. This is not a gaming podcast, so I'm not going to be covering Pokemon Go. Instead, I thought I'd take you back to 1998, and I was about 7. It was my 7th birthday, and I went to go to the UCI in Sutton in London. It's not the UCI anymore, it's Odeon now, but it used to be called the UCI Cinema. And 7-year-old me, for the first time, saw Pokemon on the big screen. Yes, that is what we're going to be doing today. This episode is going to focus on Pokemon the first movie. This is going to be quite a trip down memory lane for me, and I'm sure millions of others as well listening. So the IMDb plot for this one is scientists genetically create a new Pokemon, Mewtwo, but the results are horrific and disastrous. Yeah, he pretty much destroys that laboratory in a rage. Which kind of brings me on to my first point. I kind of see, why Mewtwo is enraged. I'm kind of, there's a part of me that, I feel sorry for him. Because he's just been, dragged into this. He's just been dragged into existence. And it's like, oh, your overall life and your whole purpose was just a test. Well, I suppose it was, he was created for Giovanni, who's the leader of Team Rocket. And yeah, he pretty much destroys that laboratory. Goes against Giovanni when he realises that actually all he's been, designed for was to fight other Pokemon, and that was pretty much it. And it's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. I am my own, being. I've been dragged into creation for, a completely ridiculous reason. I'm gonna stand on my own. And his plan is very dark. His overall plan is to basically find the best Pokemon trainers throughout the world, bring them all together, clone them, and then basically let his storm that he started, kill everyone so he can start anew. That's quite dark. I kind of didn't realise it. It's one of those things where you don't really notice it as a kid, but then you rewatch something as an adult and go, that's actually quite dark and depressing. Which kind of brings me on to an interesting point, is that he's brought those clones into this world for kind of the same thing, or a similar thing. So those clones are feeling the exact same way as Mewtwo is. So kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I think ironic is probably the word I'm looking for. If you haven't listened to the soundtrack, the orchestral score, you've got 2 of the soundtracks. There's the soundtrack with all the pop songs on it, and then there's the one with the orchestral music on it. The soundtrack, the songs are interesting because they're very sort of 90s. Like it's kind of like, because I still listen to a couple of songs on the soundtrack, but they are definitely tracks where you're like, it's a guilty pleasure. The orchestral score is actually really good. Like, my favourite tracks on it is the birth of Mewtwo, which is at the beginning, and Tears of Life, which is during that sad scene where Ash gets turned to stone. And also the original cast for Ash, Misty and Brock are back, and for Pikachu. And Mewtwo also has a human voice, which the voice acting for him was really good. I still really, really like it. He's very he sounds a bit like a Timothy Dalton, like he's very powerful. Like if he told you, like, you know, if that voice was like, I'm powerful with this and I'm going to do this, you're like, yep, okay, you do that. It's very sort of not intimidating, but just quite strong. He gets the clones to fight the original Pokemon to test their strength and to test his own strength against Mew. He is basically a clone of Mew, for people who haven't seen the film before. But one thing that was interesting about when the film was released was that the critics didn't really react very well to the fighting, because the film's basically saying, like, throughout that fighting scene, when the clone and originals are fighting, they're basically saying that fighting's wrong and shouldn't be allowed. But obviously you go to season 2 and, you know, so on and so forth, and there's still Pokemon battles and nothing's really changed. Well, I suppose nothing's really changed because they get their memory wiped at the end, don't they? I never really understood that one, because for me personally, when I was watching the programmes, I always saw Pokemon battles, so the trainer battles, as like exercise. Like we've got, like, you know, boxing matches and wrestling. It's just a different form of exercise, really. I always saw it as that. But then Mewtwo's form of battles is like, you know, imagine someone getting beaten up in the street or something. That's kind of the difference I saw. And yeah, Ash intervenes and is like, you know, we've got to stop them. They're just going to keep on going. And the clones and originals end up getting tired and fed up. And what's interesting is that Pikachu's one of the only ones, Meowth is another one, but Pikachu is one of the ones that's like, no, we shouldn't fight, and he stands up for himself. But the clone is still trying to fight. And when he ends up, like, he literally just starts, like, smacking him across the face, while the original Pikachu, Ash's Pikachu, is still going, no, we shouldn't do this. But it's like, the clone Pikachu's wrestling with himself because he's being told to do this, but he's not sure if he should, which I thought was sort of an interesting thing. And then, yeah, Ash intervenes with the fighting, and the psychic powers of Mew and Mewtwo actually turn him to stone. But the Pokemon bring him back to life through their tears. Mewtwo then learns that actually the human was basically sacrificing himself and trying to get them to stop battling because he actually cared. You know, he cared for the Pokemon overall and didn't want them to fight like this. Which is when Mewtwo says pretty much my favourite quote, like, ever, which is, I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Which I suppose is the overall message of the film. The film's basically sort of showing, I suppose, Mewtwo as, like, you know, we see him as, like, evil, or he's sort of portrayed as, like, evil, and like he shouldn't be, you know, he's not a good Pokemon, even in the series, because there's a couple of scenes that cross over with the series, and they say, like, he's an evil Pokemon, like, you should stay away from him, kind of thing. But that's through his actions. You know, his first actions, the moment he's fully created and fully born, is a bad one. So obviously we're going to perceive him as a bad Pokemon. I've also listened to there's a commentary track for this as well, which is actually really interesting, because it goes into, like, you know, behind the scenes stuff of, like, the voice acting, and obviously the Japanese, they had to redo quite a lot of film for the Japanese, from the Japanese version, because I think the Japanese version is quite different. There's a lot of things in the Japanese version of the film that wasn't there in the European and American version, the English language version. One of the differences was that the original story was that Mewtwo was to be shown in a bit more of a nicer way. Like, it was more supposed to be that he felt like he had no place and just wanted to earn his place in the world. And then obviously you had the English version, which is like, he's just an evil, emotionless creature who wants to destroy the world. What I found interesting is that according to the trivia page on the IMDb page, was that apparently the producers of the English version, looking back, felt that they made the wrong decision with the English language version, which I thought was kind of interesting. Another thing that I thought was interesting, again taken from the trivia page, was that this was supposed to be the end of Pokemon. This was originally supposed to be the whole series finale, and that was it. Obviously, however, Pokemon is stupidly and highly popular, so they made a few changes to the film so that it would then, hint that the program and everything wasn't over. There's an interesting sort of blooper, I guess, which was brought up in the director's commentary, but then also it appears in the film. When the Pokemon are being cloned, Team Rocket actually are there as well, and they end up going to the island where this is all happening, where all the cloning and all the battles are happening, and they find the cloning area. And while the Pokemon are being cloned, they're looking at the projector screen that is showing all the different Pokemon. And the first one they say is Alakazam, but the Pokemon's actually a Cypher, which is something I noticed literally straight away. But what I found funny was that it originally was a mistake. They didn't realise they'd done that. And then it was apparently the sound engineer's son noticed it and was like, that's not Alakazam, that's the Cypher. But then they were going to change it, and then they were like, actually, we'll keep it in. For people who didn't watch the original series, I don't know if they still do this. I haven't watched Pokemon in years, but I don't know if they still do this. But the original series, during the ad breaks or before and after the ad breaks, they'd have a little game called Who's That Pokemon, where they'd have a silhouette of the Pokemon and you had to guess what it was. So before the ad break, they'd have the shadow, and then before the program restarted, they'll give you the answer. So they left it in because of that, because they were like, oh, that'll be, a good thing for the fans. To test their knowledge of Pokemon by that point. Overall, this is still one of my favourite sort of animated films. Pokemon was a huge part of my childhood, so it was actually really nice to revisit this one, and it was quite sort of nostalgic to revisit this one. I don't know whether it's still my favourite. I was originally thinking, do I still like it because of nostalgia, or because actually I think it's a good film? But I think it's a mixture of both. Like, I do think this is a really good film. Obviously, I love the soundtrack. I like the sort of character development of Mewtwo. And then I just think the story's kind of interesting. Yes, it's very dark, but I think it is sort of interesting. I suppose this film also goes like, evil can be changed. Like, because Mewtwo starts off as not a nice character, but he changes his ways and realises actually what I was doing was wrong. So I think that was sort of an interesting development in his character and his personality. But yeah, I do really like this film. I remember I did sort of relook at a lot of reviews that were around at that time, and obviously they were just like, it's just the marketing, a big marketing tactic to sell more cards in the games, which I suppose is fair enough. I can kind of see that, but I do still feel that they put a lot of effort into this film, and obviously it pays off. Before I end the episode, I want to bring something up actually. The very last behind the scenes episode of 2016 is going to be quite a special one. Basically, it's 20 years of Pokemon this year, and I was thinking sort of on the last Friday of this year, I'm actually going to be doing an episode covering the Gen 1 history of Pokemon. Gen 1 and partly Gen 2. I'm only doing the generations that I grew up with, so anything to do with, that side of it, I'm going to be covering, which includes how Pokemon began, the trading card game, red, yellow, blue versions on the Game Boy. I'm going to be covering Pokemon Origins, Pokemon the first movie, Pokemon the movie 2000, and the Pokemon Go app. I don't know how long this episode is going to end up being, but I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff to do with Pokemon the first movie in that episode. So that was Pokemon the first movie. If you have any suggestions or any films you think I should look at on the podcast, please let me know. I have a Twitter, which is @ZKittyPodcast, and I also have a website, which is zombiekittypodcast.wordpress.com, and I'm also on SoundCloud and Podbean. But thank you all for listening, and I will see you all soon. Bye!